Okay, I think we'll start. Um, there is a recording. I'm making it now. You won't be recorded because you're all silenced, so you don't have to worry about that. But we will distribute the recording afterwards so that you can share it with your friends and colleagues, and also everyone who's not here can see it. I'll send it to you, but it will also be on the Network of Buddhist Organizations website. So my name is Monisha. Um, uh, As a Buddhist, I am a member of the Triratna Buddhist Order, and quite a lot of other members of Triratna are here, I see. But I'm also the safeguarding lead for the Network of Buddhist Organisations UK, and we take safeguarding very, very seriously. And I'm really keen to encourage all Buddhist organisations in Britain to do their absolute best. It's too easy when you look at the kind of things that go on in other traditions to think, oh, that couldn't happen with us. But it can, and it'll be a real shame for us to, well, for people to be harmed. Obviously, that's the priority. We don't want to harm people, but also for the good name of our traditions and the Dhamma, to be tarnished by our not doing our best to avoid harm. So I'm really happy today to welcome Sarah from the Charity Commission for England and Wales, who's very used to giving such presentations. And everything she's going to say here today relates to all faith traditions, all charities, but uh, it's angled particularly at us as Buddhists. And there is a Buddhist case in the presentation, just so you really, really understand, it can happen here. Things can go wrong. So we'll have half an hour presentation roughly from Sarah, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. So perhaps be noting your questions as you go along. You can put them in the chat. But she does have her email address at the end, so you don't have to get all your questions in the last 10 minutes. Okay. And we really don't want to go on for more than an hour on a lovely free Saturday morning. So uh, if your questions don't fit in today, you can put them to her afterwards by email. Okay. We won't be dealing with cases today. That's not the purpose. Today is principles. So yeah, so I'll hand over to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you for giving up your Saturday this morning. It's a very gloomy day here in London, so hopefully this will be a bit of a welcome distraction to all the rain and gloom outside. But I know some of you are joining from all over the globe, so this is exciting as well. Right, so let's get stuck in, shall we? I think it might be more like 40 minutes, Manisha, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. Okay, right. So as Manisha said, we all of our guidance around safeguarding is aimed at all charities. Okay, so as the regulator, we need to have a standard approach for particularly for things like governance issues, and safeguarding is part of governance, it's a part of your policy making, and it's a part of keeping people safe and make sure you're running effectively and safely for public benefit. Okay, so what I hope for you to get out of today is for us to provide an overview of the Charity Commissions for safeguarding expectations, to know how to report serious incidents, and to signpost you to additional sources of support and guidance. And just a small caveat that this isn't safeguarding training. We're not a safeguarding body. We regulate charity law, but of course, keeping your beneficiaries safe falls under your trustee duties, which is what makes you compliant with charity law. Okay, so we'll be covering what our expectations are, and how we expect you to meet them, and also what I always say at the beginning of my safeguarding webinars or events is two things. Number one is that safeguarding is part of your risk management processes. Okay, so it's a risk. Keeping people safe, working with human beings is risky. Okay, so try and see it as what could go wrong and how could we stop it? What measures can we put in place to stop it from going wrong? Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, and secondly, as the regulator, we have standards that we expect charities to meet, okay, across the board, not just safeguarding. Obviously, there are things that clean cut that absolutely you cannot do, and things that you absolutely should be doing. But there are also areas in which we expect you to be aspirational, right? We want you to meet these standards as far as possible. And where you can't, what we expect is for you to be able to demonstrate that you have risk managed that. You've seen, okay, we aren't able to reach this standard. What can we do to make sure that we as a trustee board feel confident and secure in the fact that we are doing our best to mitigate this risk? Okay. And usually, where that's happened, where good, robust trustee decision making has taken place, then it's very hard for you to be challenged on your decisions. Okay. If you can demonstrate that you have considered your approach really carefully and worked together as a trustee board to make those decisions. Okay. So let's move on, shall we? I'll briefly touch on trustee duties. Okay, so we've got number 1, which is to comply with your charity's governing document and the law, ensure your charity is accountable, act with reasonable care and skill, ensure your charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit, acting in charity's best interest, and manage your charity's resources responsibly. Okay, so you'll see that there isn't really a jigsaw piece that is specific to safeguarding, and that isn't on purpose, and that's because we see safeguarding as a golden thread that should run through absolutely everything that you do. Okay, people's safety should be of the utmost importance. Okay, and a basic, one of the most fundamental principles of Buddhism, you don't need me to tell you, is is not to harm others. Okay, and again, that should run through it. For the commission, it's keeping people safe. Okay, so it needs to be at the forefront of all of your decision making, and you need to be making sure that you are following frameworks around safeguarding depending on particular activities that you will be taking on as a charity. Okay, so if we drill down in more detail, the Commission safeguarding guidance, so the first part of the guidance says, as part of fulfilling your trustee duties, whether working online or in person, you must take reasonable steps to protect from harm people who come into contact with your charity. And charities working with children or adults at risk have extra responsibilities. So as a trustee, you must make sure your charity fulfills this responsibility. Even if you delegate some activities to a safeguarding lead or group, you still retain overall responsibility. All right. So what that means is if something were to go wrong, from the Charity Commission's perspective anyway, we'll be coming to you as a trustee board to ask, what happened? Okay, what could have happened differently? How did this happen in the first place? Okay, we'll be looking to you. You will be held to account for anything like that. I would say as well, even if you're not a trustee on this call today, but you are working within a charity, working within your Buddhist organisation, then this is still relevant for you. Okay, you can go back to your trustee board and say, wow, okay, I learned this today. Well, hopefully you'll say wow, but depends on how this goes. But you'll go back to your trustee board and say, okay, these are the standards that we and these are the expectations from the commission. Are we meeting those? Okay, and I'm sure trustees will be happy to have conversations if these things aren't happening already, and you're able to bring them some information. Okay, so please don't feel that you're being left out. If we keep referring to trustees today, it's just because all of our guidance is geared towards trustees for the reasons above, that we hold them to account for the running of the charity. Okay. And we have some links at the bottom of the slide here to some really useful guidance around safeguarding, more general guidance around safeguarding. So why is safeguarding so important? Well, again, sorry if I'm stating the obvious, but harm and abuse can have a devastating impact. And having a strong safeguarding culture means that you protect people, of course, you minimize the risk of harm or abuse. Everyone has confidence their concerns will be dealt with appropriately, and everyone at the charity understands their role. Okay, sometimes it can feel a bit like this is another thing we've got to do. It's another bit of policy we've got to create. I can assure you as an ex-teacher that having proper safeguarding policies and procedures in place are paramount to keeping people safe. All right. You need to use them. You need to make sure that people know where to find them. I'll go into more detail about policies and procedures, but it's essentially, if something were to go wrong with a safeguarding of a child protection matter, something happens with an adult at risk, or any person who comes into contact with your charity, you have a set of guidelines, to which, for which your volunteers, your staff can look at and know, okay, this is what we need to do. This is how we deal with this type of incident. And it can really alleviate a lot of confusion, a lot of delay, and a lot of those horrible, complicated things that come with dealing with a safeguarding issue when there isn't any framework in place to manage them. Okay. So if we move on to how the Commission's expectations fit into this, so we want you to provide a safe and trusted environment. We want you to set an organisational culture that prioritises safeguarding. We want you to have adequate safeguarding policies, procedures and measures in place, and to handle incidents as they arise. Okay, it's as simple as that, and we'll go into those in more detail as we go through. So protecting people who come into contact with your charity is not just, so for us, it's for some institutions, it may just be children, it may just be adults at risk. For the Charity Commission, it's everybody. Okay, so that's people who benefit from your charity's work, your staff, your volunteers, or anyone else who perhaps comes into contact with your charity through its work. So it could be perhaps you're doing a fundraising event, or you've opened up a retreat for the general public to get an idea of what Buddhism is about. Even in those circumstances, you must make sure that those people, because they are there as a part of your charitable activities, that they are kept safe too. Okay. So I touched on at the start on risk management. Okay, so the Charity Commission takes a risk-based approach to all of its casework and all of its engagement, and we expect charities to do the same. Okay, and as I said, try and think about safeguarding in a way of, what could go wrong? So who could get hurt, essentially? How could somebody be harmed in this instance? And how could we stop that from happening? What can we put in place to mitigate that risk? Okay. So as part of your trustee duties, you must identify and manage risk. So doing that, identifying and managing the possible and probable risks that a charity may face is a key part of effective governance for charities of all sizes and complexity. And this beautiful graph here just demonstrates that essentially the higher the risk, the more you've got to do to manage that risk. So more risk, more effort to mitigate the risk. Okay. You need to make sure that significant risks are known and monitored, and that trustees can make informed decisions and take timely action. Right. So we'll touch a little bit on how faith charities are sometimes more vulnerable when it comes to safeguarding. And I think, again, the principles of most faiths are, the opportunity to give people the opportunity for people to turn their lives around. Okay, opportunity for redemption, seeing the best in people. All right, so we'll go into a little more detail about the vulnerabilities that faith charities face. So they're often run by volunteers, which is fantastic, okay? But the commitment may not be there. And that's where that culture, that having a culture within your organisation that prioritises safeguarding can really help, okay? People lead busy lives. They have so much going on outside of their volunteering role. How are you ensuring that they understand their safeguarding responsibilities and that they are implementing them on a day-to-day basis, or on the days that they are working and volunteering for you? Secondly, a lot of faith charities have an open door policy, okay, which is fantastic. It's beautiful. It's, it's what hopefully we all try to instill, give people opportunity to come in, to understand the faith, to be a part of your traditions, to welcome people in. However, if you physically you just have people coming from off the street who you don't know, who are strangers, how do you ensure that your existing congregation, your existing members, how do you feel assured that they are being kept safe? Okay, so it could be as simple as, children must be accompanied by their adult, or their parent, essentially, at all times, or the person taking care of them. Simple, basic ideas like that. Okay, so just these small things you can put in place that makes everybody feel safer, and know that their safety is taken seriously. Also, rehabilitation and redemption, again, a beautiful principle. However, we understand that there are some people who've committed some fairly awful crimes, wanting to turn their lives around. And I know we must see the best in people, but that also presents a risk. Okay. So how do you manage that tension between wanting to allow someone to turn their life around, but also knowing that they have done things in their past that could put existing members of your tradition or even people in the building at risk? Okay. So it would be up to you as trustees to manage that. Okay. What processes, what policies can you put in place to allow people to turn their lives around, but also keep your existing members safe? Similarly with trust, you want to see the best in people, but unfortunately, I want to see the best in people. We all do. However, sometimes people let you down, and that's a risk. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. Give people opportunities to demonstrate their commitment to the faith, to demonstrate the good within them. However, we have to be aware that sometimes people do bad things. Okay. So again, it's just about eliminating the opportunity for harm to come to those who are active within your charity or come into contact with your charity. Okay. Spiritual authority, which I know can be a real issue of contention within Buddhist charities, and I understand that, not just Buddhist charities, but charities, faith charities across the board. But how do you balance, being a trustee with also not wanting to upset the teacher? Okay, how do you distinguish between, okay, this is the charitable activities, the trustees make these rules, okay, and then not feeling like you're undermining the teacher, but also keeping that relationship going and understanding where responsibilities lie. Okay. And also relationships continue outside of the place of worship. And we've seen the massive increase in online relationships and WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups as a result of COVID. And they're still continuing because it's a wonderful way to connect with people. However, there are risks when you're operating online, okay, particularly things like WhatsApp, Facebook, where there's a direct message implication, a possibility to message people at all hours of the night. Okay. To get yourself into sort of murky water where even if you send someone a message, let's say at about 11 at night, even it might be an innocent message, but someone could turn around and say, why that's kind of inappropriate to send me a message so late at night. Okay. So it could even be a principle of, if you've got a WhatsApp group together, make sure that after a certain time period you're not sending any messages, okay, that is only active between a certain number of hours. But again, you can make it work for you. That it's up to you. You know best how your organizations work. But that would be one way to alleviate any issues there with sort of inappropriate messaging and things like that. So another part of creating, well, one of the key parts that the Charity Commission wants to see charities doing is creating a safe environment, okay, that prioritizes safeguarding. A key part of this is vetting. All right, so having good vetting checks for when you're taking on new staff and volunteers. So these are all part of a good, robust vetting process. So you can have references, job history, identity documents, DBS checks, and overseas checks if it's relevant. Okay. Again, this is one of those expectations of the Commission that are aspirational. It would be wonderful if you can get all of these. Okay, or if you can get all of these parts of the vetting check in place. However, we understand that there are some times where you won't be able to get all of those pieces. So you may not be able to get perhaps a reference. Be a bit concerned if you can't get identity documents. That would be slightly concerning, wouldn't it? But overseas checks might be tricky. Okay, so what you need to do is make sure that where you haven't been able to perform part of a vetting process, that you found a way to manage that risk. Okay, if you're really keen to take this person on, but you're missing one part of this vetting process, what can you do as trustees? What can you do to make yourselves feel that actually we haven't been able to perform this check, but if we do X, Y, Z, then we feel confident that we've made the right choice and that this person is safe to work within our organisation. Okay. So we've got a slide here that has a few of our available, not the commissions, but what we've seen as some good resources when it comes to getting criminal record checks. Okay, so we've got DBS, which hopefully most of you will be aware of, and we've got links to some really useful guidance there around getting the right level of check. I will send Manisha after this the links to the DBS Spring Conference, and they had some incredibly useful guidance around getting DBS checks, how they work in sort of short 10-minute videos. So I will send those over to Manisha to send to you when you get a copy of the slides, because they're really useful. And I know DBS can be sometimes a bit confusing, okay? And hopefully that will help to clear up some of that confusion. You've also got your certificate of good character or conduct. So this is provided by most countries' police forces or a relevant embassy in the UK. And you can see the Home Office's website for country by country information. You have the International Child Protection Certificate, so that's the ICPC, and that's for UK nationals or those who have previously lived in the UK and want to work with children overseas. And it's administered in the UK by ACRO, Criminal Records Office. And then you've got the Misconduct Disclosure Scheme, so it's a membership site basically, and you can use the scheme to protect your charity from individuals who pose a safeguarding risk. So it's an information sharing platform, and it's all GDPR compliant, don't worry about that. And even if you're not a member of the scheme, you can still apply the principles. Okay, so hopefully those will be useful to you when you get a copy of the slides. We also expect you to conduct checks on any new trustees that you're taking on. So obtain a declaration from the prospective trustee that they are not disqualified, and consult the official registers of disqualified persons. And you've got links to the bottom of the links at the bottom of the slide to those. Okay. So I've talked about policies and procedures a bit at the start of the presentation. So let's go into a little bit more detail around that. So I'm not sure if you're aware of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. It was a huge inquiry that came about as a result of quite a few high-profile incidents of child abuse. And they did a specific part of the investigation into religious settings, okay? And the recommendation that came out of that was that all religious organisations should have a child protection policy and supporting procedures, which should include advice and guidance on responding to disclosures of abuse and the needs of victims and survivors. The policy and procedures should be updated regularly with professional child protection advice, and all organisations should have regular compulsory training for those in leadership positions and those who work with children and young people. Okay, so I thought I'd include this because this isn't coming from the Charity Commission, but it is coming from an enormous inquiry that had hundreds and hundreds of people involved in giving evidence and conducting the inquiry. And this is one of the key recommendations that came out for religious settings. So I would really, really urge you to try and emulate what is being advised here with the recommendations. Okay. So when it comes to your charity's policies and procedures for protecting people and safeguarding, they need to be put into practice, responsive to change. So look at what's happening around you. Do you need to update some of your policies and procedures? Reviewed as necessary and at least once a year, available to the public, and compliant with all relevant legislation. So if we look at that middle one again, so reviewed as necessary, we would expect you to review your policies and procedures once a year, but also following a safeguarding incident. So it's just for you to feel assured that, you know, either things are working and that was just something that happened unexpectedly and there was no way to plan for it, or it's an opportunity for you to look at maybe perhaps some gaps in your policies and procedures and work on trying to fill those gaps, okay, to prevent any incident from happening again. So you should have to start with your safeguarding policy statement. So that sets out what your organisation will do to keep people who come into contact with your charity safe from harm. And it should set out your organisation's commitment to protecting those who come into contact with your charity, the more detailed policies and procedures your organisation will put in place, and how you'll keep those who come into contact with your charity safe from harm. Okay. And then next you'll have the bone, the flesh of it. Okay, so this is your safeguarding and child protection procedures. So these are the detailed guidelines and instructions that support your safeguarding policy statement. And they should explain the steps that your organisation will take to protect those who come into contact with your charity from harm, what to do when there are concerns about a member of staff, volunteer, or beneficiary. And I won't go through each of these, but these are for you to have when you're going through the slides following this webinar. And these are just some examples of policies and procedures, but you can tailor those policies and procedures any way you want to your organisation. Okay, you can have policies that reflect solely what you do at your organisation. Okay, but there's some pretty generic, boring ones like storing records, which should be, quite easy to manage. You've got making sure all your activities and events are run safely, so make sure you're looking at health and safety guidance and things like that, and policies around taking, storing and sharing photographs and images of children. And there's a wealth of support and guidance around this available on the internet, and I'll provide links at the end of the slides too. Okay, I think it would be remiss of us not to discuss sort of online safety, seeing as we operate so much within the online on social media these days. So we've got the 3 C's in our guidance, which is content. So does your charity have adequate control over its website and social media accounts? So who can post information, and is all content suitable for your charity? You have contact. So how do people talk to each other when using your online services, and how do you keep users safe? Do people need passwords to access services? And then conduct. So how do you monitor what people do, say, and share when using your services? I always like to say when it comes to this section, I like to mention during lockdown, do you remember when people were doing the Zoom bombing for like religious meetings with church groups and stuff, and people were laughing? But I always, I didn't find it funny, because what had happened was that people had come together to feel safe, to share, to speak about their faith, to talk with like-minded people, to have some contact with the outside world. And then what happened was people were uploading incredibly explicit, graphic, pornographic images within those Zoom meetings. So someone had managed to get in and thought it'd be funny to try and traumatize the people who otherwise would never have chosen to look at stuff like this in their own time. Okay, and then that's the type of harm. Okay, someone's come to harm that they will never forget what they've seen. Okay, as a result of someone doing that, and through the charity's activities, that was allowed to happen. And it could have been resolved very, very simply by just having passwords for people to join calls, having a list of the email addresses of the people you'd be expecting to join the call. Okay, so when we talk about risk management, it can sound really overwhelming, but it isn't. It is essentially, okay, we've seen that people are doing awful things in Zoom meetings. What can we do to change that? And it's as simple as a password to get into the meeting, having a list of who you expect to be joining that meeting. Okay. And we've got some guidance at the bottom of this slide, like we do on most of the slides in this presentation, which will hopefully be really, really useful afterwards. Another really, really good way of setting, setting a standard within your organisation, setting that, allowing people to feel that and know that you take their safety seriously, is having a code of conduct. So when you take on new staff, take on trustees, take on volunteers, it's really, 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 really good to have a code of conduct, a clear code of conduct, okay? And it should set out your charity's culture and values and how people in your charity should behave. Why this is so useful is that you're essentially getting someone to sign up to a contract. I mean, it's not legally binding essentially, but I mean it could be, but we don't want to, that might be a bit of overkill. But it's just a piece of paper that says this is how we expect you to behave because these are our values. Okay, we don't want anyone to be harmed, and we want you to share that feeling with us. Okay, and if you get someone to sign up to that, they are making a commitment to you. But also, if everybody who's a part of your organization has also signed that code of conduct, and they see that someone else isn't adhering to your standards, is completely not living up to what's being expected of them, then they will feel much safer to challenge that behavior. Okay, to say, hang on, we all signed up to this at the start. This doesn't look like what's expected of us, and this is not emulating our culture here. Okay, so it can be a really empowering way to get people to challenge behavior too, when they see that people are not following the code of conduct. Okay. So one of the really good practical piece of advice from the Commission is to have a good code of conduct when you're taking on trustees, or even just create one now. It doesn't have to be if you don't have one, you can get one together now and say, Sarah said it's a good idea to have a code of conduct, and then you can start to disseminate that throughout your organisation. There are also some additional requirements, sort of slightly, they are connected to safeguarding, which are first aid, fire safety, and digital safety policies and procedures. So you need to make sure everyone understands those. Welfare, discipline, and whistleblowing policies for staff, if you have them. Suitable health and safety arrangements in place, and a complaints process for users and others with concerns. Okay. And as Manisha mentioned at the beginning, I will talk you through now a commission inquiry, which happened within a Buddhist charity. Again, it's always good to see things in practice, isn't it? To see how these things can play out. So this was a commission inquiry, and this is the most formal of our regulatory engagement. And we opened this into a faith organisation, a Buddhist organisation. And in this case, we identify some serious safeguarding failures within a charity. So how did it start? So the commission was notified of a letter alleging mental, physical, and sexual abuse of individuals. The commission was informed that the charity had engaged lawyers to investigate these allegations. And the lawyers found some students were subjected to abuse, and senior figures had known about the issues and had failed to act. Okay. So once we were aware of this, okay, we opened inquiry under the Charities Act 2011 to establish and investigate the seriousness of the allegations, the extent to which the charity provided a safe environment, the failure to report serious incidents, governance concerns, and public trust and confidence concerns. So this case actually attracted quite a lot of media attention too. So the risk to public trust and confidence was immense. Okay, and we all know, we live in reality, that media, the news outlets will always be looking for an opportunity to find scandal, particularly in faith settings, in places of worship. Okay, so that they will do their best to make sure that everybody knows about it. Okay, so, and that can have a devastating impact on the sector as a whole. So what were the failings? The inquiry found that the charity's safeguarding policies and procedures were inadequate. Okay, so there essentially were none. So this abuse was allowed to continue because people didn't know, weren't aware that there was even a safeguarding framework, that there was even a acceptable way to behave. Okay, there wasn't a safeguarding culture within that organisation. It also found examples of allegations of mental, physical, and sexual abuse prior to the letter that had not been reported to the Commission. Okay, so we expect you to let us know about any serious safeguarding incidents. And some key former members of the charity's governing body had failed to demonstrate the willingness and capability to effect meaningful change to the charity's safeguarding culture and processes. Okay, so they didn't do anything, essentially. They did nothing about it. And the inquiry found that misconduct and mismanagement by former senior figures at the charity had led to the risk that public trust and confidence in the charity and charities in general would be adversely affected. Okay. So what were the conclusions? The commission inquiry concluded that there was mismanagement and in the administration of the charity. Former trustees failed to respond to respond to and manage safeguarding concerns. Their failure to create a safe culture within the charity exposed some beneficiaries to harm, and the seriousness of these findings resulted in the Commission exercising its powers to disqualify and remove 2 of the former trustees. Okay, so it was incredibly high profile. It was not an accurate representation of Buddhist faith, Buddhist organizations, but it was catastrophic for this organization. Okay, and then but mostly it was devastating for those victims, for those survivors who had come to trustees, to those who were supposed to be upholding these safeguarding standards, to say this has happened, and they did nothing. Okay, so you don't have to be the person who is committing offences, who is harming people physically. Inaction can be one of the worst forms of harms. Okay, for when it comes to dealing with safeguarding issues, if you do nothing, it's how can you have a clear conscience? How can you say that you've protected people from harm if you've been made aware of issues and you didn't do anything? Okay, I'm not saying you will, but I'm just saying, in this instance, as you can see from what the results were for these trustees, their inaction actually, made the experience of the survivors of this abuse worse. Okay, so let's move on to reporting incidents of harm, because that's what they failed to do. But I'm sure none of you on this call would do that, hopefully. And now you've got even more information about how you can report incidents of harm and what we'd expect to see from you. Okay. So charities should report any serious incident that results in or risks significant harm to people who come into contact with your charity, loss of your charity's money or assets, damage to your charity's property, harm to your charity's work or reputation. And I think we're in a safeguarding webinar. So these 2 here, harm to people who come into contact with your charity and harm to your charity's work or reputation, will be the most pertinent when it comes to safeguarding. So what does a serious safeguarding incident look like for the Commission? So it would be incidents of harm or mistreatment, alleged or actual, of beneficiaries of the charity. So this could be adults or children. Someone connected with the charity was responsible for the harm or mistreatment, alleged or actual, of people who come into contact with the charity through its work. And breaches of procedures or policy at the charity which have put people who come into contact with it through its work at significant risk of harm. Okay. So when it comes to handling incidents, we'd expect you to handle and record it securely and responsibly, follow your policies and procedures, act quickly, report to all relevant agencies and regulators. So I didn't know before I started this role, which was a bit rubbish because I was a teacher before, but that you must report safeguarding incidents to the DBS too. Okay, so not just us, so the Charity Commission, definitely, of course, DBS, police, if it's relevant, local authority, anyone who would anyone relevant, as as the bullet point suggests. Okay, so report to all relevant agencies and regulators. We want you to be as open and transparent as possible and to review what happened. So when I talked about, reviewing your policies and procedures following an event, that's where that reviewing process comes in. Okay, get together as a trustee board, say, okay, how did this happen? How can we stop this from happening again? And we've got some really useful guidance at the bottom of this slide from DCMS around guidance on handling safeguarding allegations in a charity. I just want to say here as well that I think there is some nervousness when it comes to reporting serious incidents to the Charity Commission. I just want to reassure you that 9 times out of 10, when we get an RSI, there will be a human being who will look at that report, that serious incident report, and make a decision. And 9 times out of 10, they will say, I think the trustees have got this all under control. They might write back and ask for a little bit more information and then would ask for an update. But the vast majority of the time, we trust trustees, again, the clues in the title, trustees, to just be able to get on and manage that situation. What we want, that the RSI, with the serious incident reports, what we want is that to be an open channel of communication between the Commission and the sector, okay? We just want to know what's going on and whether or not we need to provide support or whether or not we feel that you have everything in hand, okay? We want to protect the sector. We want to support and protect the sector. If we were having opening inquiries left, right, and centre, then how would that would damage public trust and confidence massively. We absolutely understand that trustees have their charities, most trustees have their charities' best interests at heart, okay? So when you send us a report, it's just about having that open channel of communication between us and the sector. And it can also help us identify any trends or any issues that the sector may be facing, okay? So it's actually really useful to us to see what's happening within charities, okay? We also have a little table which has examples of what you might want to, what would be worth reporting to us and what we might not want to see. I would say, if having looked at that guidance, having looked at that table, you're still not sure about whether or not to report to the Commission, then I would just send us a report anyway. It's better to say something than to say nothing at all, of course. And the word nothing will happen. There's not going to be any angry person getting your serious incident report saying, well, why have they sent us this? They'll just say, thank you for letting us know. We think you've got this all in hand. Okay, so please, if you're not sure about whether to report something, just let us know anyway. It's better to say something just than to say nothing at all. Okay. And then this is just step-by-step guidance on, well, I say guidance, but a little flow chart on what we'd expect to see if you have a safeguarding incident. So report to the relevant authorities, follow our guidance, and use the online form. Okay. And print this out or have it there at your fingertips if you do have a safeguarding incident, that you have this here and you know what steps to follow. Okay. And obviously there are links within those points that you can use to help you make informed decisions and to make that reporting process and dealing with the incident much more streamlined and effective. Also appreciate that you may be working with others, partnering with others overseas. So in that case, any incident which is not reported overseas would still need to be reported to all relevant authorities in the UK. That would be including, where appropriate, submitting a serious incident report to the Charity Commission. And where a British national or person with a claim to British residency has committed or potentially committed child sexual abuse or exploitation overseas, this should still be reported to the National Crime Agency in the UK. Okay. And finally, again, this is just a slide that I would like you to take away with you, to print out, to bring out when you have your trustee meetings. And these are 10 actions trustee boards need to take to ensure good safeguarding governance. Okay. And it's just sort of talking points, key areas that you can discuss to make sure that you are upholding the safeguarding standards within your charity and that you're keeping it live, you're keeping it fresh in your heads. Okay, so go over each point and make sure you're feeling confident that, for instance, in this yellow square here, that people know how to raise a safeguarding concern, for instance. So do you still feel that it's clear how people can raise those concerns within your organizations? Are you reviewing posts within the charity that can and must have a DBS check from the DBS service? Okay, have you checked those? Do they need to be updated? And are you regularly evaluating any safeguarding training provided, ensuring it is current and relevant? Okay, so just a couple of talking points for your trustee meetings when it comes to your safeguarding point that will be on your agenda. Okay, your safeguarding agenda item. And as promised, a slide full of useful links. Okay, so anything we can't cover as the regulator, we've tried to find really relevant and useful guidance from external sources that can hopefully prove to be really useful for you if you are trying to make decisions, safeguarding decisions within your organisation. And I will now pass back over to you for questions. But what I will do is I will leave the slide up which has our email address. So if you have any questions that I can't answer today, then please do email this address, and I will member of the team will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. And thank you very much. I'll just pass back over to Manisha if there's any questions that have come through.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Really great. I thought you'd like to know that someone has actually messaged me and said that they're really enjoying this.
Oh, great.
So when someone uses the word enjoying about safeguarding
No.
presentation, I feel like we've hit the jackpot, really.
Well,
So
yeah,
thank you
definitely.
very much.
No worries. That's all.
So yeah, we do have one question here, which is
Yeah.
Sarah has used words like requirements, make sure, and must have. Does this mean these things are mandatory from the Charity Commission's point of view?
Yep. Okay. So we use two types of language within our two words within our guidance was must and should. So where you see in our guidance or where I've said must, but I mean go back and check because it's Saturday morning, so I may have used the wrong word. So I do apologise. But I think I've done this enough. Where I've said must, it usually is a legal requirement. Where it's should, that's one of those aspirational things, right? Okay. So that's where that would be. The expected standard, and we'd be expecting you to try and meet that standard, and if you don't, you'd have to feel assured that you have legitimate reason to not have met that safeguarding standard. Hopefully that clears that up. But in our guidance there's must and should, so there will be differentiation between what's a must and what's a should throughout our guidance.
Thank you. Yeah, when I was a safeguarding lead in Triratna, I would always say that if you want the benefits of being a registered charity in England and Wales, these are the terms on which that benefit is being offered. Yes, thank you. And then we have someone saying the definition of serious incident seems to include another term, which was significant, in quotes. Significant seems to be defined as significant in the context of your charity, taking account of its staff, operations, finances, and/or reputation. Any guidance on how to determine what is significant enough to warrant reporting something?
Okay, well, again, you'll find that with a lot of our guidance, we will say it's up to you as trustees to work out what would be significant within your organisation. But I won't do that to you today because I do understand it can feel like a bit of a minefield when trying to make those decisions. So, for instance, let's say I'll try and do a very basic one. Let's say you were a charity who does girls football after school, all right, and someone's broken their ankle. That would be something that's a possibility that could happen quite a lot. People know if they're going to sign up to a football class that they might they might break their ankle, right? Potentially, depending on depending on how it came about, we potentially wouldn't need to know about that. Okay, it's a safeguarding incident. Someone's been hurt, but it's expected. It's football. It's a contact sport. Okay, if someone had run in off the street because the gate wasn't locked and kicked someone and broke their ankle who wasn't part of the game, then that would be significant. Okay, that would be someone was put at undue risk because a certain policy or procedure that perhaps a gate needs to be locked, or we need to make sure that everyone is accounted for, that we know who's on the premises. That hadn't been followed and someone was hurt as a result of that. Okay, so if there's day-to-day things that will happen within your organization, then it'll be up to you as trustees to decide, okay, this is, but I couldn't think on the spot of an example, but if you feel like this is something that happens that is not going to have a significant impact on how we run. Okay, if someone were to know about this outside of the organization, would it damage our reputation? Would people feel reticent about joining our organisation if they know about this? It's significant in terms of how it would affect you and how you run your charity. Okay, but like I said, if you're not sure, if something's happened and you don't know whether to report it to us or not, just report it to us anyway. Okay, even if that turns out not to be significant, no one's going to say to you shouldn't have reported this to us. It would just mean that we feel that you are able to deal with it, and it's not something we would need to be involved in helping you manage. Okay, hopefully that clears that up.
And we have another one, which is if a serious incident report is triggered by an in quotes, alleged or actual incident, is there a danger that allegations can become weaponized? So I suppose this is how can charities protect themselves against malicious allegations?
So weaponized by
By
who?
people who wish you ill and just want to
Okay.
besmirch your reputation, say,
Okay.
or people who are just not very stable, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you report a serious incident to us, it's confidential. Okay. It won't go anywhere unless it becomes a published inquiry. But as you see, that was the highest of our commission's powers. Okay. So that's when something really, really bad has gone wrong and trustees would have been potentially would have been at fault, and then we would do an inquiry. Those are the only ones that are public. Okay. A serious incident report never, it's completely confidential. Only the charity commission, the person who submitted that report, or anyone else who was involved in the submission of that report would know about it. Okay. You let us know about malicious because we know that people being malicious can have a significant impact on the running of a charity. That's still a serious incident for you. That they may be false allegations. Okay. But the fact that you've had a false allegation that has been made about your organization, that's malicious, that could affect the way you run and the way that you're perceived. That is something that you'd want to report to the commission, that we'd want to see, that we'd want to know about. Okay. But in terms of it being perpetuated by reporting to us, that wouldn't happen because it's confidential. Okay. No one would know about it apart from us and the person who sent in, or the people who sent in the report.
Thank you. Another question about reporting incidents. What about reporting an incident that involves a member of one's tradition or charity, but not in the context of their involvement with that charity, for example, within their own family or their
Yeah.
workplace?
Yeah, of course. So there's some really good guidance actually around this on the DBS. I can't remember the term for it, but it's about that behavior that's outside of the organization. So that stuff that's happening in your personal life, and how you can use that information to create, you can, make employment decisions and also submit concerns around that person. You have to think about how that person's behavior could have an impact on your charity. Okay. So they may be doing something that's outside of your charitable activities, but that person is still associated with your organization. Okay. If it is going to have an impact on the way your charity operates, on the way your charity is perceived, then, I'm not telling you what to do, but it could be sensible to send a serious incident report to us. But it would be up to you as a trustee to understand to work out how that person's external behavior, if we call that, could have an impact on your charity's reputation, and the way that your charity is perceived by the public. Okay, so again, it's about that relationship between that behavior outside and how it could affect their work with your organization.
Thank you. Okay, we've got two more questions here. Is there a recommendation for how often DBS checks should be reviewed or updated? I think that's every 2 years now, isn't it, the recommendation?
Yeah, and when you do a brand new DBS check, you can sign up to the update service, which automatically does it for you. Okay, but
And it's for the role, isn't it? It's not for the person. The person,
yeah,
I mean, sorry, yeah, so the person can't come in with a DBS check from another context
yeah,
and use that in your context because it has to be
yeah.
tailored to the role they're doing for you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But
Uh,
I will send those 10-minute videos out
yeah,
to,
do. That'd be great.
and they're
You
really
can post
useful.
all this stuff on the NBO safeguarding page on their website eventually.
Okay.
Here we have another question. What if we have someone who comes regularly and benefits and feels safe with us, but is depressed and suicidal and sometimes when not with us? How far does our responsibility extend?
Well, that it's a tricky one to answer on the spot, okay? Because there's so many complexities that would come with that situation, okay? I do appreciate how difficult that must be. However, there are, I think the commission wouldn't be best placed to answer that question. It would be up to you as trustees. Sorry to say, I know it does seem like a bit of a bit annoying, but I couldn't tell you what to do in those specific circumstances. But that's where, and see, you've posted 31.8. That's where advice from them would be incredibly useful about how to manage that situation going forward. Okay. When it comes to your responsibility, again, think about it on a personal level as well. If someone's coming to you who's suicidal and depressed, okay, what can you do to support? Can you point them towards another organization who deals with that? If you've got serious concerns for their welfare, do you need to talk to the police? So again, as a charity, as a trustee, or as a member of an organization, there are things that you can do, but also as an individual, there are things that you can do to feel assured that you're giving that person the best support. But as the commission, we wouldn't be best placed to answer that question, unfortunately. But there will be bits of resources from the slides where you can find hopefully useful support and guidance around answering that question. But I wouldn't be able to answer that today.
No, it's quite detailed, isn't it? So, and just to say, I've put the link there to 318. They have a free helpline. You don't have to be a member to use the helpline, and they really are very good. And quite a lot. Actually, we've got two more questions here that really are questions, I think, for 318. For example, here's a very relevant one where, if you've got vulnerable people who disclose something from their past in a confessional type scenario, how should the charity handle that information? People think that we have to keep it confidential because they've confessed it, but of course that's not actually, the law doesn't protect them at all, does it? Do you want to comment on that, or would you leave it for 318?
I think it wouldn't be best placed for the commission to answer that, because that is the sort of safeguarding. That would be part of your policy making, your procedures, and that would be up to you as trustees to manage that the best way that you can going forward. So I wouldn't be able to answer that one.
And do you need DBS checks if there's a policy of no unaccompanied children? Do you want to comment on that? Or
well, our guidance, so this is a good example of must versus should. Our guidance said that basically you should have a DBS check, a basic DBS check. Okay, so anyone can get a basic DBS check. They're free for volunteers as well. It's not a must, but if something were to go wrong in this realm of safeguarding, we will be asking, well, you should have got us. Why did you choose not to get a basic DBS check? If it's free, if it's available, anyone can get it. Why did you not get a basic DBS check? Because if someone is refusing to get a DBS check, that would also raise alarm bells for me. So I think if you have a standard that, this is me not talking on behalf of the commission, but from a sort of common sense perspective, for me, I would say get a basic DBS check. It doesn't show up loads of, it just shows up some, it's not a very detailed DBS check. It's not a detailed criminal record check, but it's just a good way to sort of make you feel assured, another part of that vetting process that can make you feel a bit more confident about who you have within your organisation. So if you can get a DBS check, then why wouldn't you? Would be my thing.
Then we've got the question, two questions. DBS checks, are they free? They're free for volunteers, aren't they? Certainly, if you join 318, they're free, certainly, as part of your membership. Oh gosh, right. Okay, another DBS question. Where you say direct contact with children, is this a children's event rather than a public event where there just happen to be children?
That would be for the DBS to answer, but hopefully, again, the 10-minute videos that they did for their spring conference are so useful for clearing that up. But there's lots of different types of contacts you can have with people at risk and with children, but that's DBS guidance. It's not commission guidance. Okay.
And is someone 17 years old considered a child? So they're over the age of consent, which is 16, but they're under the age of majority, which is 18.
Yeah, so in
consider them to be a child?
UK law, a child is anyone under the age of 18.
Yep. Okay, that's the end of the questions, and I think that's pretty much the end of our time. So, and people are already needing to go. People saying it's been very, very informative, and Sarah is very clear. It's been really helpful, so very good feedback. And even from Australia, this is so helpful, even though we have a different legal setting. So many important threads to think through and take on. The principles covered are really helpful. Thank you. So yes.
And can I
Great.
just say again, thank you very much for joining us. I know safeguarding can
Mm,
feel a bit overwhelming, but it isn't. It's a basic risk management principle, okay? And you make it work for your organization. And the basic, you just want to keep people safe, don't you? That's all it is. So
yeah,
thank
we
you for
do.
joining us. And you being here demonstrates already that you have a commitment to keeping people safe. So thank you very much and have
Yes,
a good
very
weekend.
impressive. Very good. And just to reaffirm, this has been offered by the Network of Buddhist Organisations UK. So do talk to your trustees and think about joining to support the work we do, to support all of us to do our best for the Dhamma in Britain. And thank you very much for coming. And thank you again, Sarah, for the work you've put into this. Very, very
No worries.
helpful.
It's a
I'll write
pleasure.
to you all afterwards with the video and the PowerPoint, and you can share that with everybody that you work with if you want to.
Cool.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Have a
much.
lovely Saturday. Goodbye,
Thanks.
everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye.